Okay, imagine this for a second. You're up high, really high, flying one of the most advanced jets out there. All your systems, they're telling you everything's clear.
Mm.
And then suddenly, bam, no warning. A missile just appears miles away. Too late to react.
It's a pretty terrifying thought, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's right at the heart of this really fascinating but also very debated event we're going to dive into today.
Right.
You've asked us to take a close look at these claims, these stories about Indian Rafale jets allegedly being shot down.
Yeah.
This was supposedly by Pakistan during something called Operation Sindoor back in May 2025.
Yeah, the narrative is quite specific.
It is. And we really want to focus on the role of these Chinese-supplied missiles, the PL-15s, and the tactics Pakistan supposedly used. Tactics that sound, well, surprisingly sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to unpack all of this. Look at the sources, examine the techniques they talk about. Are they really new? Or just, smart ways of using existing stuff?
And what it means for air combat going forward.
Exactly. And we have to do all this while remembering. Well, the whole story is pretty contested. Lots of conflicting information.
Absolutely. This whole alleged incident, it's maybe less about just the jets themselves, Rafale versus J-10C or whatever. It's more about how everything worked together, or allegedly worked together.
They're a network.
Precisely. This idea of a kill web, how all the pieces, radars, planes, missiles, command centers, how they integrate, that seems to be the core claim here.
Okay, that's a really important point. So to get our heads around what supposedly happened, we need to start with the star of the show, I guess, the PL-15 missile.
Right, and the whole concept it operates in, beyond visual range combat, BVR.
BVR.
Yeah.
Fighting enemies miles away, yeah.
Yeah.
Long before you can actually see them.
Exactly. It's not the old school dogfighting from the movies. It's more like a long-distance chess game with missiles.
A very deadly chess game.
Indeed. And the PL-15 is a major piece on that board. It's Chinese, supplied to Pakistan, and Operation Sindoor, if the reports are true, was its first confirmed combat use.
First combat use. That's significant.
Very. Apparently, debris matching the missile was found over in India in the Punjab region. So its debut in 2025 wasn't just, a new missile. It was potentially a major test against a really top-tier opponent.
Right. And the range on this thing, we're talking pretty far, aren't we?
We are. The reports say the version China uses might go over 200 kilometers. The export version, the PL-15E, which Pakistan likely has, is maybe closer to 145 kilometers.
Still, 145 kilometers, that's huge. The claims mention engagements happening, 11 to 85 kilometers inside Indian territory?
Yeah, well, within that missile's reach. It definitely changes the game if you can credibly threaten targets that far out.
So is it just about range, then? Hitting hard from far away?
Not just range, no. I mean, range is critical, obviously. Yeah. But the PL-15's other features are just as important, maybe more so. It has this active radar guidance using an APS seeker.
Yeah. Active electronically scanned array. That's the advanced stuff, right? Like tiny steerable radar beams.
Exactly. Thousands of them. It makes the seeker incredibly precise, very hard to jam. And, crucially, it's much better at telling the difference between the actual target and, say, a decoy or electronic countermeasures.
So once it's fired, it finds its own way.
Pretty much, yeah. In the final phase, it guides itself, which makes it very resistant to electronic warfare trying to spoof it or jam it.
Yeah.
Plus, it's apparently quite maneuverable with aerodynamic fins to handle agile targets trying to dodge it. And it uses a dual pulse motor.
Dual pulse? What does that do?
It basically gives it a second kick of acceleration later in flight. Helps maintain high speed all the way to the target, even after flying a long distance. Makes it harder to evade.
Okay, so this isn't some sci-fi weapon that appeared overnight. It's a known, pretty formidable missile. Pakistan had it on their J-10Cs, their JF-17 Block 3s, even before May 2025.
Correct. It's often compared to the Rafale's own main BVR missile, the Meteor, which is also very capable.
But as you said, it's maybe how it was used. That's the real story here. That brings us to this idea of silent targeting, using external data links.
Exactly. This is where that network idea really comes into play. The technique is sometimes called A shoots B guides, collaborative targeting.
A shoots B guides.
Okay. The claim is that Pakistan's J-10s, the ones firing the missiles, they tracked the Rafales without turning on their own powerful radars, covertly.
How do you track without radar?
Well, you rely on data fed to you from somewhere else, maybe an AWACS plane, that big flying radar dish like the Chinese ZDK-03 Pakistan operates. Or possibly even ground-based radars or passive sensors that just listen.
Ah, okay. So the attacking jet stays electronically quiet.
Precisely. By keeping its main radar off, it doesn't paint the target itself. It doesn't send out those strong radar signals that the Rafale's defense system, Spectra, is designed to detect and warn about.
So the Rafale pilot might think everything's fine.
Until the very last moment. The PL-15 missile itself only turns on its own little radar seeker for the final attack phase, maybe the last 30 to 50 kilometers.
Which by then is potentially too late.
That's the theory. It makes the missile's approach incredibly stealthy, very hard to detect until it's screaming in.
This whole intricate system. Sensors, shooters, data links.
Yeah.
You called it a kill web.
Yeah, that's a common term for it. It's about networking everything together. Ground radar, AWACS, fighters, maybe even surface-to-air missiles, all sharing data, guiding weapons. It turns individual units into one coordinated system.
Is this approach new?
The concept itself, no, not really. Network warfare, collaborative targeting, it's been a goal for modern air forces for a while, but Pakistan actually doing it, allegedly, using their Chinese ZDKs-03 AWACS, their Link 17 data links, that builds on systems they've been putting in place since the early 2020s.
Right.
We've even seen chatter, posts on Twitter suggesting they might have used specific tactics, like using lower frequency radars on the AWACS to guide the PL-15s in a way that might not trigger the Rafale's warning systems as easily.
Wow. Okay, so it's like this high-tech game of hide and seek, but one side is trying really hard not to even breathe until the last second.
That's a good way to put it.
So if these tactics were used and were effective, what does that say about the Rafale's own defense system, Spectra? It's supposed to be top of the line, isn't it?
It is. It's a very sophisticated electronic warfare suite. But the claims suggest potential vulnerabilities, or rather, ways it might have been bypassed.
Like what?
Well, first, as we said, if the PL-15 is guided passively initially, there are no strong radar emissions for Spectra to detect early on. Second, the missile itself, especially with its seeker off, likely has a pretty small radar cross-section, harder to spot.
Makes sense.
Third, and this is a big one in electronic warfare, the system's threat library. If Spectra hadn't been updated with the exact signature of the specific PL-15 variant Pakistan was using, or its unique radar signals when it did turn on,
It might not recognize it.
Yeah.
Or react too slowly.
Exactly. Misidentification or a delayed warning. And finally, just the chaos of combat. Multiple signals, potential radar clutter. Could Spectra have been momentarily overwhelmed? It's possible.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In this world of super smart defense systems, how do you find that tiny crack in the armor?
Well, exploiting electronic warfare systems is standard practice now. It's a constant game of cat and mouse, measure, and countermeasure. The PL-15 itself was likely designed specifically to counter advanced EW systems like Spectra.
So it's not necessarily a failure of Spectra, but maybe a successful exploitation by the attacker.
That's probably a more accurate way to look at it. It's about using the known capabilities of your weapon in a clever way. And we should add some nuance here.
Right.
These claims about Spectra being totally ineffective, they are debated. Some analysts, like one from France, suggested maybe only one Rafale was damaged, not 3 downed, which could imply Spectra did work to some extent, or perhaps its effectiveness depends heavily on pilot tactics, how updated the threat library is.
Right. No system is perfect or guarantees 100% protection.
Exactly, especially against a dedicated, well-planned attack using weapons designed to beat it.
Which brings us, inevitably, I suppose, to the human element, the pilots,
Yeah.
the strategy.
Because technology is only part of the equation.
The claims suggest the Indian Rafales might have been vulnerable, maybe flying too high, maybe too focused on their own attack runs, guiding their own missiles, perhaps not vigilant enough about threats coming at them.
That's the scenario painted in some reports, yes. That Pakistan's J-10Cs saw an opportunity, launched their PL-15s covertly, and basically caught the Rafales by surprise.
So pilot skill, situational awareness,
Yeah.
still absolutely crucial.
Absolutely decisive. Even with the best sensors, if the pilot isn't looking in the right place mentally or physically or misinterprets the data, human error or just being outmaneuvered tactically can create vulnerabilities.
It's incredible, isn't it? All this amazing tech, billions of dollars, and it can still come down to strategy, awareness, maybe even a moment's lapse in concentration.
It underscores that technology enhances the human. It doesn't replace them entirely, especially not in complex combat scenarios.
And tactical ambushes using surprise. That's as old as fighting itself, isn't it?
Pretty much. Air Combat 101, in some ways. But executing it effectively with these modern networked systems requires immense coordination, discipline, training.
And Pakistan has shown skill in this area before, right? Operation Swift Retort in 2019.
Yes, that event certainly demonstrated their proficiency in coordinating BVR engagements. So the alleged tactics in 2025 wouldn't necessarily be something brand new for them, but perhaps a refinement, applying established skills with newer equipment like the J-10C and PL-15.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've talked about the PL-15 missile, BVR combat, this silent targeting, exploiting EW systems, tactical ambushes. Are we looking at genuine innovation here or just really skillful refinement of existing stuff?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Most of the individual techniques, as we've discussed, are known concepts. BVR combat, networked guidance, EW exploitation, ambushes. These aren't revolutionary ideas in themselves. But the execution against a top-tier platform like the Rafale, if it happened as claimed, that demonstrates a very high level of operational sophistication. And the way all these elements, the J-10C fighters, the PL-15E missiles, the ZTK-03, AWACS, maybe even ground-based HQ-9P missile systems were apparently integrated into this functional kill web.
That integration could be seen as innovative.
I'd say it represents a potentially innovative application of existing technologies in a real high-stakes scenario, especially that specific tactic mentioned using lower-frequency AWACS radar to try and bypass the Rafale's specific warning systems. That shows adaptation, clever thinking within that networked framework.
So it raises that interesting question. When does applying existing knowledge brilliantly become just as impactful as inventing something totally new?
Exactly. And it also forces us, as people trying to understand this, to confront the information problem. How do you navigate these narratives when both sides are presenting completely different versions of reality?
Yeah, because we absolutely have to stress the claim of 3 Rafales being shot down, still unverified. India flatly denies losing any jets.
Right. But then you have these other sources, international reports mentioning debris, found that seems consistent with at least one, maybe two, French-built jets. It really muddies the waters.
It's the classic fog of war, but turbocharged by instant news cycles and, let's be honest, propaganda from all sides.
Absolutely. Concrete, verifiable evidence is incredibly hard to come by. What is clear, though, is the context. Pakistan's Air Force has significantly modernized, largely with Chinese help. By 2025, they had those J-10CEs, more advanced JF-17 Block 3s, all capable of using the PL-15E.
And they clearly invested in the network part, the AWACS, the data links.
Yes, that integration reflects a global trend. Air combat is moving further towards networked warfare, long-range engagements, sophisticated electronic battles, maybe less so towards the close-in dogfights of the past.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up this deep dive, what we seem to be looking at is a case study, albeit a contested one, showing how established air combat tactics, when paired with modern integrated technology,
And executed with discipline and skill.
right, can pose a real challenge even to very advanced, very expensive fighter platforms like the Rafale. The first alleged combat use of the PL-15E, the demonstration of this integrated kill web, those are significant points regardless of the exact outcome.
It really hammers home that in modern air warfare, it's often the total system, the network, the ecosystem of sensors and shooters and data that matters as much or maybe even more than the individual airplane.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? Well, we're in an age where military tech evolves incredibly fast. Information and disinformation spreads instantly. Think about how this constant interplay between human skill, electronic warfare, and these complex networks is changing conflict. What does that imply for how countries need to think about defending themselves, how they need to train their forces? It's definitely something to ponder long after this deep dive ends.